All right, everyone, it's 10 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kim Raycraft, and I'm a reference and instruction librarian at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, Florida. My specialty is STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. I've been doing reference work for at least 5-6 years, and I'm excited to share some things with you today. So when we're talking about reference in the context of today's webinar, we're talking about reference services. And really, reference service is made up of individual, what we call reference transactions. And the ALA has a division, the Reference and User Services Association, RUSA, and they define reference transactions as information consultations in which library staff recommend, interpret, evaluate, and/or use information resources to help others meet particular information needs. Okay, and hopefully at the end of the hour you'll come away with knowledge that'll help you provide high quality reference transactions to your patrons every time. And I hope we could just take a minute if you would enter into the chat. How much experience do you have providing reference service? Maybe have you just started staffing the reference desk at your library, or maybe you're being trained right now. Maybe you don't provide reference service yet, but it's something that you hope to do in the future. Hope to do it in the future. Great. "32 years, Mary Ann. Wow. Well, you know more than me then." Learning new tricks. Yeah, so, oh, and you just started, Joyce. That's exciting. Okay, and a few more that have a little experience. And you work at a call center, Colleen. That's interesting. There is always something new to be learned, Mary Ann. That's true. So for some of you, what we talk about today will sort of be a refresher, reminder. For some of you, it'll be new material. Oh, Michelle, yeah, you work in circulation and ILL, and then you help in reference when needed. That was my exact same situation a number of years ago. Circulation and ILL, and then I would cover reference occasionally. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Just a little bit about the history of reference. As education became more widespread for the general public in the 1800s, libraries became more widespread as well. And it's interesting, historians of library science usually point to this paper that's listed there, Personal Relations Between Librarians and Readers by Samuel Green, which he wrote that in 1876. They trace that, the whole concept of reference to that paper. That's sort of where the concept itself began. In the 1880s, reference, as we know it today, was actually called assistance to readers. And then eventually the term reference work came about. And we have so many different ways of providing reference service. We've got a desk, or maybe you do roving reference. In terms of school or special libraries, maybe there's not even necessarily a reference desk, but sort of a circulation desk or a catch-all desk where you do multiple different types of library work, reference and circulation. Maybe you offer consultations in your office or something without a desk, but we've got our in-person reference work. We can provide reference service over the telephone, via email. There's chat reference. I don't know if any of you staff our Florida Ask a Librarian service, that chat service. And finally, we've even got texting. Here at my library, we offer a texting service. Students can text us, and we actually get a few reference questions that way. Now, what I would like to do is, can you just raise your hand if your library has a reference desk? And to do that, you're going to click on the drop-down arrow next to the little man with his hand up. And then don't worry, when I'm ready to have you put your hands down, Luli will just clear that out for me. Okay, so it looks like most of us have a reference desk then. Can you raise your hand if you have a telephone number specifically for reference, if your library does telephone reference? Okay. All right, so yeah, most people have that as well, then 7. What about email? Do you do email reference? Okay, 3, that's great. What about a chat service? Anyone do chat? I really enjoy that, doing that Ask a Librarian. Okay, so 7 people. Chat is pretty popular then. Does anybody do texting? Yeah, it's a little less popular with the texting. Thank you, everyone. Are there any other methods that you use that I missed? You could put them in the chat box. Ooh, library instruction sessions. Okay, well, with all these different delivery methods, you know, obviously in-person is going to be different from your remote or your electronic, you know, when you have your in-person visual cues. But really, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they all require good communication. And what we'll learn today can really be applied regardless of what method you use to provide reference service. And of course, we have all different types of questions that we get at the reference desk or via email or whatever. Some of them are more brief and factual, but they can often turn into more involved questions. And then we have what I like to call our research questions, or the more in-depth questions. So things like, I need information on submarines or a specific battalion in World War II. Maybe in the public library, someone's looking for a nice mystery to read. Here in the academic library, we get so many students who come to us for help finding peer-reviewed articles on different topics, you know, they're writing papers on, that sort of thing. So we really get all kind of different questions. And the great thing is that RUSA has come up with these guidelines for behavioral performance of reference and information service providers. And you've got a link to the full document there. This is a document that RUSA has put together that serves as a conceptual framework and a service ethic with which reference professionals can consider all patron reference interactions. So no matter what type of reference question or delivery method, these guidelines can help us. And the really neat thing is that they have breakout guidelines. There are 5 main guidelines, and underneath each one, they've broken it out by general, which are tips and pointers that can be applied in any type of interaction, whether it's in person or remote, or electronic. And then those are what we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus on the general. But you've also got in-person, guidelines that are specifically just for in-person and guidelines that are specifically for remote. So you'll definitely want to print out your own copy of that document and, read through all of them. And then depending on what type of reference work you do the most, you can look at those breakout guidelines. They're really helpful. And the neat thing is that the guidelines really walk us step by step through every transaction. Okay, here a summary of our guidelines are that we need to be approachable, we need to show interest in the patron, we're going to listen and inquire about their information need, which is conducting a reference interview. We're going to conduct a search for the patron, and finally we're going to follow up. So our first RUSA guideline is that we need to be approachable. And I've got a couple of pictures here. If you look at the lady on the right, see she's looking up, she's smiling. She's not engrossed in working on her computer or writing whatever she's writing there. She's got a name tag. I've also got a little picture of an expert name tag there. RUSA states that in order to have a good transaction, before anything else, our patrons have to be able to identify that we're available to help. And they have to feel comfortable coming to us for help. So much research and literature has been done on this concept of library anxiety. You've probably heard of that, which is that our patrons feel overwhelmed and anxious a lot of the time when they walk into a library or when they're on a library website trying to navigate all the different resources. It can be hard for them to get the courage to ask for help. So that's why approachability is so important. We want to try and overcome that so that we can help them. Our first guideline there is that we want to establish a reference presence wherever patrons might look for it. So RUSA talks about things like signage, clear signage to the reference desk. If you are providing a chat service or a reference phone number, those need to be prominently listed on your web page or wherever. Okay. We need to be poised and ready to engage approaching patrons. So like we were talking about in our picture on the last slide, we need to have open body language. You don't want to have your shoulders squared off, pointed at the computer. You don't want to be distracted. I do a lot of hours at our reference desk here, and it can be really hard because, you have a computer there, and we can even do remote desktop into our own office computers, so it can be really easy to get caught up in doing your own work on the computer, emails and whatnot. And plus, the monitors are huge. So, depending on how you sit, people might not even be able to see us from behind the monitor. It's so important to be mindful of all that. And so what I try to do is, not get too caught up in working on the computer. You need to look up all the time, make sure no one is coming in. You can even look at the computer, but try and face sort of away from it, just so that, you're ready to help people when they approach. And also, you need to acknowledge people that might be waiting for service if you have a line. And RUSA even talks about doing triage, which is kind of like, if I have a line, let's say I'm working with someone and someone else comes up, I will often look at the person that just came up and ask, did you just have a quick question? Because a lot of the time they might just need to know where's the bathroom or the water fountain. I can quickly point them to that and then, get back to my actual reference question. Or if the second person has a reference question, I'll tell them, okay, just have a seat and I'll be right with you. Or maybe I'll call one of my colleagues for backup. And RUSA also points out that roving is a great technique for approachability. I think Switzerland has a webinar coming up on roving, right?
It's a face.
Oh, a face-to-face, sorry. So
In
there's
July.
a word, okay, July workshop coming up on roving. And that's great for approachability as well. Are there any questions or comments about approachability? Anything that you would like to share? Okay, our next step is to show interest. So when the patron arrives, we need to demonstrate a high level of interest in them and in their question. Okay, because this will generate a higher level of satisfaction for the patron. And it almost goes without saying, but you want to face the patron when they're speaking and listening, and you want to focus your full attention on them. You're going to want to drop what you're doing, if you're working on that computer or having a conversation with a coworker. RUSA talks about if you're in person, you should make eye contact and nod your head a little as they speak to show that you're paying full attention. If you're in a remote environment, like let's say you're doing chat, you'll want to greet them right away as soon as they come into the chat queue. If you have an email service, you want to respond to those emails promptly. So, I mean, it's very basic, and like I said, it almost even goes without saying, but it's just good to keep in mind. We need to show interest in our patrons. Are there any questions or comments about showing interest? Okay, moving on. Our next step, number 3, is we're going to listen and inquire to our patron, which is our reference interview process. According to RUSA, this is really the heart of their whole reference transaction. It's all about understanding their information needs so that you can help them. And really, it's all about communication. And RUSA also points out that we need to keep our patrons at ease during the reference interview. And I think that as librarians, we usually have really good people skills. We're usually friendly and we usually want to help. So I think it comes easy to us, but we can always work on our communication skills. I love this quote from William Katz, who is a real expert in reference work. He's written so much, several books and things. And he says, misunderstanding is the ghost which haunts numerous reference interviews. And it's so true. Lily says, boo. We want to minimize that misunderstanding so that we can provide good service. So these are our specific RUSA guidelines for the reference interview. We want to communicate in a receptive, cordial, and encouraging way. Use an appropriate tone of voice and manner. You want to allow the patron to fully state their information need in their own words before you respond. And I think this reminds me of that concept of active listening, right? In other words, don't just wait for your turn to talk. You want to identify the goal or objective of their research if that's appropriate. And you want to rephrase the question to make sure that you understand, which is another big active listening behavior. And finally, another RUSA guideline is that we want to avoid confusing terminology and excessive jargon with our patrons. So we don't want to do library speak with our patrons. So you don't want to say something like, well, you need to place an ILL. Well, what's an ILL? They may know or they may not know. So, just bypass our jargon in our library language and say it in terms that, a non-library person would understand. Like, we can request this for you from another library. Oh, and Lily says, I can't say OCLC? No. What we don't want to say is things like, well, you checked the catalog already, right? Or you don't want to like make a face and wince and say, oh, I don't know, I don't think we have anything on that topic. Or as soon as they tell you what they're looking for, well, you're going to have to change your topic. Or just right off the bat saying, well, you're going to need to go to a medical library for that. And you know, they may indeed need a referral, or they may need to broaden or modify their topic a little, but the point is we don't want to have a defeatist attitude right off the bat and say these type of things right away. You want to work through the reference interview before you jump to negative conclusions like this. So our reference interview is going to consist of open-ended questions, which are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. So they're designed to get more information out of the person. So questions like, can you explain more about this? Where have you looked so far for information about this? How are you planning to use this information? You know, that can be helpful. Where did you hear or read about this? Can you give me an example? And these questions are especially helpful if it's something that you personally aren't knowledgeable about as a librarian. Of course, we can't be knowledgeable about everything, right? Are there any questions so far? If you wouldn't mind, can anyone give me an example of maybe another open-ended question in the chat box? Anything that you don't see here that you think is a good open-ended question?
What is OCLC?
Oh, Cynthia, what is OCLC? Gosh, what?
Online
Computer
library center.
Library Center.
I think.
That we think.
Good one, Rachel.
It's one of those things. It's like you can't. It's so basic that you just forget about it.
Rachel.
Roberta says, what kind of format are you looking for? Oh, yeah, that's great. What kind of resources do you need? Rachel, that's great. Colleen, may I make a suggestion?
No, Colleen, can you?
Those are great. Thank you, everyone. And then you're also probably going to need to use closed or clarifying questions. And these are questions that are designed to check your understanding and sort of refine what they're saying. So these are questions like, what have you already found? Are you saying blah, blah, blah? You know, this is where you rephrase the question. Did you mean da, da, da? Is this the type of information you're looking for? And in terms of open and closed questions, I mean, there are just tons and tons of examples of lots more in the reference interview literature and on the web and that type of thing. Any questions about closed questions or the reference interview? We're going to move on from the reference interview now, so if there are any questions about that or any comments or concerns. Okay, moving on. After our reference interview is all finished, it's time to conduct a search. So you're going to come up with a search strategy, which of course is such a big part of our skill set as librarians. And during the search, we're going to keep the user informed and involved. And hopefully during the search, we can also include some teachable moments so that we can empower our patrons to use the library for themselves in the future, become better researchers themselves. And it's funny because when you first start sitting at the reference desk, it can be nerve-wracking. I remember when I first sat at the reference desk here at FGCU, I was so excited, you know, to be able to provide a few hours a week. I was looking forward to it. I didn't think I was nervous at all. You know, I had taken a couple reference classes toward my MLIS. And it was like, yeah, let me at it, I'm ready to go. And I went down there for my first shift, and I could not believe how nervous I felt when that first student walked up to me and was asking for help. I couldn't believe how on the spot I felt. And I panicked, frankly. I mean, I panicked. I immediately started looking in some resource that wasn't really. Thankfully, someone was shadowing me, and she sort of, oh yeah, Rachel, you remember feeling that way too. It's funny, isn't it? It catches you off guard. But that's perfectly normal. So, if you're new to reference, just realize that it's normal to feel nervous. So let's talk about our RUSA guidelines for searching. We're going to find out what they've already tried and encourage them to contribute ideas during the search. We're going to construct our search strategy, like we said. So this involves selecting search terms, which of course can always be a challenge and like a hunt, right? Hunt for the right search terms. We want to verify spelling and other errors. A lot of the times spelling or factual errors can get in the way of a search strategy. And we're going to identify the best sources for their information need. And of course, it's so complex, and it really takes practice. It takes time to become familiar with our library's resources and all the other myriad resources out there for information. I recommend just doing practice searches all the time. Practice searching in your library's databases and whatever else, just to keep your searching skills sharp. And we want to explain our search strategy and sequence to the patron to make them more knowledgeable as well. Moving on, we have some more guidelines here. You want to try and do the search within their time frame. It kind of goes without saying, but some people are more in a rush than others, and you can kind of gauge, use your people skills to gauge how much time they're willing to spend. Explain how to use the sources. You're probably going to need to work with them to narrow or broaden their topic. I would say this happens to me, 75% of the time when I'm working at the reference desk. Their topic, their initial topic, will either find too little or not enough. So then we need to work together to narrow or broaden it. So you want to keep them involved in that process. And it's funny, when you're talking with them about narrowing or broadening, it's really like you're kind of going back to the reference interview process. To step 3. They kind of can blend together. And let's see, Michelle says most of the students do very much when we explain how we do our searches. Oh yes, absolutely, right? Because that way, the next time, they can just do it from home in their dorm room. Right? But it's very important to, make it a teaching experience. And of course, if you're in a public library, they can use the resources from home as well, which, they're always thrilled to place holds and use the databases from home. Okay. Ask the patron if more information is needed after an initial result is found. Recognize when, you may need to do a referral if you're not finding enough. And finally, RUSA says we should offer pointers and detailed search paths, offer the names of resources, so that they can, again, learn to answer similar questions on their own later. And finally, another tip that I don't see here that I think is important is, if you can, turn your screen or monitor so they can see clearly during the search. And then I see Rachel has a question here. Do you have any recommendations for finding questions to practice searching in databases? Oh, that's such a good question. And, I was even thinking about that myself the other day, because I would love to do more practice searching myself, but I remember when I was in library school, we had a big worksheet of practice questions. I think there may also be some books out there about searching that may include some practice questions. And finally, we could probably also just Google it and maybe find some questions. or maybe some YouTube videos, Luli pointed out, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns about searching anything? Okay, moving on. So our transaction is almost done. We've had our interview, we've searched and hopefully found some good information for our patron, but we're not done yet. RUSA points out that the librarian is responsible for determining if the patrons are satisfied with the results of the search. And this can really determine whether our reference transaction is successful or a failure. And these are our RUSA guidelines for following up. You want to ask if their question has been completely answered. You know, a question like, does that answer your question? Can I help you with anything else today? Encourage them to return if they have more questions in the future. You know, hey, if you need more help, come back and see us. Roving can be a good technique for follow-up. I mean, let's say that you send them to the stacks to get some books. If you can, go with them to find the books on the shelf. And then maybe later, if you see them in the stacks, just drop by if you think they're comfortable with that and say, hey, how's it going? Can I help you with anything else? You may need to consult another librarian if the question is outside of your subject expertise. We do that a lot at the reference desk here. We'll call each other when we need to, and you don't want to hesitate to do that. And make them aware of other services that are available, sort of plug your other library services if you think that's appropriate at that moment. And RUSA has some more general guidelines for following up. Make arrangements when you need to continue researching even after they leave. I do that a lot if I haven't been able to find enough for a student or they're still struggling and they have to go. I'll say, give me your email address. I'll take it down and keep looking. I'll email you if, I think of better databases to try or better search terms. Maybe I'll even email them an article or two. Refer them to another library if you need to. And if you do that, you want to make sure to do as much as you can to facilitate that process. And as librarians, I think we cooperate so well together across different libraries. We're constantly sending people to the Lee County library system, if they need to go there and we can't really meet what they're looking for at FGCU, which happens a lot, like if they're looking for books on tape or more children's books, things they have that we don't. But you don't want to just say, oh, well, go to Lee County Library System, right? You want to make sure, do they know how to get there? Maybe give them directions. Sometimes I'll even print a map and directions. Give them the phone number so they can call, that sort of thing. People almost always really appreciate that. And you can even help them with the other library's website. Like if they have their Lee County library card with them, sometimes we'll go into that website together and place a hold together on a book. And finally, just a final reminder from RUSA that you don't want to end the reference interview prematurely. Are there any questions or comments, any concerns about our RUSA guidelines for following up? And of course, the same stands for email or chat as well. Jean Adams says, I have, oh, okay, Luli will get with you about that, no problem, about getting a certificate of participation for today. Okay, what we're going to do now is watch a short video from YouTube that's going to pull it all together with our 5 RUSA steps. What I'm going to do is share my screen, so you're going to see another box pop up on your Adobe Connect, and you'll see the video. Okay, and then I'll come back. So here we go.
Sure. You're free.
Oh, okay. Gosh, this is really uncomfortable. It's making my head hurt.
Oh, great, thank you. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, that's it. Thanks.
Can you see it?
Can I help you find something today? Yeah. Do you have anything on
I hope
graphic
they can
novels?
see it.
Let me go. See, I'm in classroom this time.
Yeah, I can definitely
Oh,
help you
good.
with that.
Okay, she said
How will
yes.
you be using this information? It's for school. I have to write a story in my English class, in the form of my choice, and so I chose graphic novels. Okay, can you tell me a bit more about what you're working on? Well, I had to choose a specific type of graphic novel, so I chose manga, but I don't really know that much about it, so maybe something on the style of manga? Okay, so you're writing a story for your English class, and you chose graphic novels, specifically
God,
manga,
it's not
but you
taking
need some information first before you can start.
Yeah,
That's right. Okay, so what exactly is missing from your understanding of manga? Maybe how they're created? Okay, that's a good place to start, actually. We do have material here that will be of some use to you. Have you ever used our online catalog? A long time ago, but I don't really remember. Okay, I can definitely show you how to look up materials. Would you like to do that now? Yeah, sounds great. Okay, let's go.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend that you start looking for books on your topic. Does that sound like material that will help you? Yeah, I actually came in looking for a book, so that'd be great. Okay, great. So I'm putting the search term making manga into the catalog to see what results come up. This is starting to look familiar.
Now what they thought about it. Was it a little over?
So it comes up with 8 results. Do any of these look relevant for you?
So this and this, and you're gonna.
I think the second one, making comics, storytelling secrets of comics, manga, and graphic novels.
Alright, so if we click on it, we can see the copies, and what we should do is write down the call number, and then I can take you to the stats, and we can find that for you.
Okay.
And if you want to search again, you can use the same search term, or more broadly search manga. You can also note the subject headings that are arranged on the side here.
I think I just want that one book right now.
Okay, so what we can do is we can go over to the stats, and we can look for this book, but we'll also look in the same area to see if there's anything else there that will be helpful to you. You want to do that? Yeah, sounds great. Okay, let's go. Here you go.
Thanks, this looks great.
And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of other materials here that are related to your topic, so you're welcome to continue browsing as you have.
Thank you so
Or
much.
even if you don't do it, just tell me that. That eats up some time.
Is there anything else I can help you with? Did I answer all of your questions?
Actually, where do we sign these books up?
You can do that at the circulation desk. That's downstairs to your right. If you're having any other problems with your assignment, please come back to see us and we'll help you out.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've got that.
Okay, I gotta plug this back in. Okay.
You're okay. Roberta has a question.
Oh my gosh, do I have to redo the PowerPoint? I should do that yesterday.
You can ask them when you're doing that.
Okay, everyone, I'm having to re-upload the PowerPoint here for a minute. But did everyone enjoy the video? What did you think of it? What was your favorite part? Approaching and offering help instead of waiting for them to come to you, right? Roberta, roving, right? And taking her right to those books. Let's rove, yeah. Yes, it was Canadian. It was from the University of Toronto, some library school students. And I noticed that she said, instead of checking the books out, she said, "Can I sign these books out?" That was cute. Little differences there. The listening skills and the communication of the librarian, right? Yes, we'll send you the PowerPoint in PDF format at the end of the class. She made sure the customer was satisfied. Colleen, yes, I agree. And you know, it almost was a little overboard the way I noticed after every step. It was like, does this sound good? Does that sound good? But of course, you know, this was for training purposes. And it's always good to remember to check and make sure the patron is satisfied throughout the transaction. Oh, Sonia, you missed a few things because you're multitasking. That's okay. The video is called the Reference Interview Project. And if you just type in Reference Interview Project into YouTube, the search box, it'll be the first thing that comes up. And again, that was from the University of Toronto, so maybe if you type that in too, it will help. Any other final comments or questions about the video or about the RUSA behavioral guidelines? And just to review, the guidelines walk us step by step through the transaction, and they are that we're going to be approachable, show interest, we're going to listen and inquire with our patron and conduct a reference interview, in other words. We'll conduct a search, and finally we'll follow up with them. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about ethics. And what I have here on the screen is the American Library Association Code of Ethics and a link to the Code of Ethics. And what you see on the screen is I pulled out the items that I feel are most appropriate for reference service. So this isn't the entire code. So I took the liberty of picking the items that I feel are most appropriate. We're going to provide the highest level of service to all our users. And we're going to offer accurate, unbiased, and courteous responses to all requests. So all those requests we get in our reference service, we need to provide a very high level of service. We're going to uphold the principles of intellectual freedom when we provide our reference service. We're going to protect each user's right to privacy and confidentiality with respect to information sought or received, and resources consulted, borrowed, acquired, or transmitted. So, in other words, we need to be sensitive. You know, what happens at the reference desk stays at the reference desk, right? Even if it doesn't seem like a, juicy topic or whatever. We need to respect our users' right to their privacy and confidentiality. And finally, we want to distinguish between our personal convictions and our professional duties. We don't want to allow our personal beliefs to interfere with fair representation of the aims of our institution or the provision of access to their resources. There are so many hot topics that people are researching, both academically and for their own personal reasons. Religion and politics, like they say. I've helped students find information on things like euthanasia, global warming, abortion, and these can be really sensitive topics. So it's important to remain unbiased when we're helping people research these types of things. And I know they also talk a lot about that in collection development as well, being unbiased in collection development. The next thing on the screen here is our RUSA guidelines for legal, medical, and business questions. Now, this is not an ethics document, but I included it because I just feel like it ties in so well with the ALA Code of Ethics. Of course, legal, medical, and business questions can be sensitive. Our first guideline, and again, I just pulled out specific guidelines from the document. This isn't the entire document. I just pulled out what I feel is most appropriate for reference service. And if you want to look at the whole document, you're just going to go to that link right there to pull that up and read through it. But when we're asked legal, medical, or business questions, we want to make it clear that our role is to be librarians. We're not going to actually provide legal, medical, or business advice. That's not our role, right? We're not lawyers, we're not doctors, we're not stockbrokers. What we're going to do is advise our users about sources in legal, medical, and business, and make recommendations about library materials and information sources. And we want to make that clear. Confidentiality is especially important with our legal, medical, and business questions. We don't want to discuss those questions outside the library. Okay, again, keeping our users' privacy and confidentiality. And information query details and names should never be mentioned without the user's permission. We need to use discretion during the reference interview. RUSA points out that while it's important to conduct a thorough interview, we need to do this in a way that minimizes discomfort to the user, because these can be very personal questions, right? Sensitive questions, and we want to use our questioning techniques to determine their information need and how to help them, but we want to use discretion while we do that. And again, try and identify the issue without intruding on their privacy. And finally, yet another reminder that we need to be impartial and non-judgmental when we're handling these sensitive questions. And I really feel that these are great pointers for any questions that we get, really. They don't have to just be for legal, medical, and business. This is just a great set of guidelines in general. Are there any questions about ethics in providing reference service? Any comments or concerns? Yes, Michelle says that being impartial and non-judgmental is key. It's so important. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, moving on. Are there any comments or questions about anything that we discussed today in our introduction to reference services? Oh, Michelle says, I've witnessed staff in other libraries not really try to assist a patron simply because of how they're dressed. It's sad. Everyone is equal. Indeed. It's so important. We need to provide the highest level of service to everyone, and it doesn't matter how they're dressed or any of that. And I see some people typing, so I'll wait for those messages to come through before we wrap it up here. Brooke says, I don't believe we do anything like roving reference at my library, but we are public. Would something like roving be relevant? I absolutely believe roving would be relevant in the public library. I mean, academic library, really any library. And you know, we don't really do roving here where I work either. We staff the reference desk really, and it's not like we have a roving program, but roving, I think, has so much potential. So I would love it if we did roving here. And Michelle points out it helps if we can speak other languages. Oh, absolutely. See. Well, you've got references here from the presentation today, so those are direct links to all the wonderful documents that we looked at and talked about today. And then after that, I've put some additional resources up here. The first one is the Ask a Librarian Exemplary Reference Awards. Ask a Librarian is our statewide Florida chat service. Show of hands, how many actually participate in Ask a Librarian? Can you raise your hand if you do Ask a Librarian? I know we asked about chat earlier, but specifically Ask a Librarian. Oh, great. So most of you then are probably familiar with the Exemplary Reference Awards. Every month they choose 3 chats that they felt were above and beyond, and those are in the categories of brief chat, detailed chat, and teaching chat. And I included this link because it's really neat. You can go there and actually read through the chat transcripts to get an idea of what is high quality chat reference service. So I highly recommend that. And there are entire books and videos on the reference interview as well that might be helpful. That Berkmeyer reference there is actually an entire DVD about conducting the reference interview, and I've got a couple books listed as well. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for spending time with me today on our webinar. I think Luli has some things to say about additional events, and she's grabbing her microphone here now. Any other questions or or concerns or comments, anything to share. Oh, you're welcome. And I apologize that my mic wasn't muted during the video. I guess you guys could hear me talking to Lily. I'm sorry about that. I forgot to mute my mic while we were doing that video.
Everyone has raised hands. Ask them if they have.
It's because of the Ask Olivia.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Kim. Oh, thank you. Michelle is talking. You might have a question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
It's really good for 2 people registered.
There's some people that have 6 people in the room, but I'm not going to have to ask them. Just because it shows 12 doesn't mean some people are in twosies and threesies. So sorry, silly question of the day. How do you log off? Just close the window.
Hey, Michelle. Yeah, you can just close the window and that'll log you off just fine.
If anybody has any questions, just
Thank you.